Welcome to Martinique. This beautiful French island is nestled in the heart of the Caribbean, and its first name was actually Madinina, which means Isle of Flowers, and that's because of the abundance of flora and fauna to be found everywhere on Martinique. The wildlife is also pretty mesmerizing, from iguanas to hummingbirds and even dozens of species of crab. And while most people associate Martinique with being full of white sand beaches, that's not all there is to see here. Of course, there are those if you're looking for that, but there's definitely more than meets the eye. In this video, we're going to show you the best things to do in Martinique, including cascading waterfalls, challenging hikes, beautiful beaches, colorful fishing villages, and even some hidden gems. We're actually here for the next 2 weeks to explore, and we'll be heading from north to south and east to west. As a result, this video will actually be broken down into segments of the island as opposed to a set itinerary. But first, a little history of Martinique. It's hard to put a date on the exact arrival of people on Martinique, but it's thought that some of the first inhabitants of the islands were the Arawaks, who arrived from what is now Venezuela around 2,000 years ago. 900 years after that, the Caribs arrived. Everything changed in 1502 when Christopher Columbus became one of the first Europeans to make contact with the people who lived on the island. Thus began a period of intense colonization, predominantly under the French, but also with a hand from the British. Although many people see Martinique as a paradise-like island today, it would be a great injustice to the people who suffered at the hands of the European colonizers, not to mention the painful chapter of slavery on the island. For hundreds of years, thousands of people were forcibly removed from their homes and exploited here in Martinique. If you want to learn more about this period of history, which I definitely recommend you do, then I highly recommend heading to the Savane des Esclaves. On May the 22nd, 1848, slavery was officially abolished here in Martinique by order of the French government. In 1946, Martinique was made a department of France in its own right. What that means is that under French law, it's treated much the same as Île de France or Brittany in mainland France. In 2010, the people of Martinique voted in a referendum which gave the people of the island more self-governing powers. Today, when you visit Martinique, you can find much of the same services that you would find in mainland France in Europe, such as the same banks, the same postal service, lots of bakeries, and even the same shops. The North Caribbean. As its name would suggest, the North Caribbean can be found in the northwest of Martinique, and the area is crowned by the Piton du Carbet and the Montagne Pelée, which are some of the highest points on the island. This area is studded with waterfalls, picturesque fishing villages, and is the perfect place to relax on volcanic black sand beaches. The area is also home to the world-famous Jardin de Balata. Saint-Pierre is now one of the most beautiful places to visit in Martinique. It was founded all the way back in the 17th century by Pierre Belin, the pirate, but the most devastating chapter of its history occurred in 1902 when the Pelée volcano erupted, killing 28,000 to 30,000 people. Basically, everyone who lived here didn't make it, apart from 2 people, one of them being a prisoner who was sheltered due to the location of his prison cell. Today, it's home to 5,000 people, which is around a sixth of the amount of people who live here on Martinique. The town is sheltered in a natural bay, and highlights today include a daily market, though there are definitely more stalls on the weekend than during the weekdays, a monument to the 1902 eruption, and a beautiful church. Saint-Pierre Market takes place from Monday to Saturday, though there's a greater variety of choice and stalls on the weekend. Here you can pick up all sorts of local produce, including fresh fruit and vegetables. The market is truly the beating heart of the town, and so I really recommend parking nearby, heading to the market, and then going out to explore the rest of Saint-Pierre on foot. Truth be told, one of the best ways to get to know Saint-Pierre is simply to wander around and allow the place to reveal itself to you. This is definitely one of the most picturesque spots to visit on the island and is really, really popular among tourists and locals alike. Today, traces of what Saint-Pierre was like before the eruption can be found all over town. For example, this is the former theatre. It was actually constructed in 1786 and based on the Little Red Riding Theatre of Bordeaux. It actually closed down 1 year before the volcanic eruption due to financial difficulties, and you can still visit the ruins of it now. Saint-Pierre is often nicknamed the Pompeii of the Caribbean because everything was covered in ash during the volcanic eruption at the beginning of the 20th century. Today, if you want to learn even more about this tragic event, then you can head to a museum which was newly renovated in 2019. Because the rainwater is so intense from the mountains, the gutters are huge, which makes it really scary to drive. Look how deep it is. Some of Saint-Pierre's greatest treasures actually lie a little bit out of town, and so it's really a good idea to take your car, head up the hill and enjoy some of the best vistas as well as meet some of the local residents. If you want to get amazing views onto Saint-Pierre, then you have to come up to the Vierge des Marins. This dates back to 1870 and the statue was actually built on the site of a former battery using the old defensive stones. Today, you can get beautiful views onto the town, the sea and beyond. On a clear day, you can even see Montpellier, which is not the case today. Domaine Depaz is another rum distillery in the north, which is really close to Saint-Pierre. It's really cool here because they give you this little leaflet with a small map to guide yourself. It's a self-guided visit around the distillery and also the chateau. You can even see the sugar canes. What's interesting about this visit though is although it's completely free to wander around at your own leisure, you do have to pay to visit the interior of the chateau. I think it's €5, and then for a rum tasting itself you have to pay €7, which is a bit different than many of the other distilleries on the island. We've just arrived at Couleuvre, which is in the northwest of the island at the very far end of the road, the farthest that you can go. Here there's a waterfall, a beach, so let's go and see what it has to offer. This area is also home to a former sugarcane plantation. Here you can wander around the ruins and read the associated signage to learn more about the history of the space. This is Anse Couleuvre, which means Couleuvre Beach. Like the rest of the north of the island, it's all volcanic black sand here. In the distance, you can even see the next island over. That is the independent country of Dominica. And we're also going to make a video on that island, so be sure to check that out while you're on our channel. We're now going to be making our way up to the waterfall. It's up the river Couleuvre. Do be sure to wear comfortable shoes that are really good to walk in because there are several river crossings and the path itself is not very even. Right now it hasn't really rained recently, so the water isn't that high, but hopefully I still won't fall over. The path is only around 1.5 kilometers to actually reach the waterfall, but because it's quite steep up the hill and also you'll probably stop and take lots of photos of lizards, it will probably take around an hour to reach it. We finally reached the waterfall and I definitely think the hike up was worth it. The waterfall is 20 meters in height, and if you're feeling particularly adventurous, then you can even stand under the base of it. It's definitely not what I was expected because it's cascading down the rock face, but it's very beautiful to look at. We saw people on these vines before, but I probably should say don't try this at home. The Prêcheur is a little fishing village around 10 kilometers north of Saint-Pierre. There's not much by way of attractions, but it is very beautiful. It's also home to the oldest bell tower in Martinique. When we actually reached the bell tower by following a steep and winding road, it seemed as if the structure has probably seen better days. We then headed back past Saint-Pierre at golden hour, which was truly stunning, before continuing on to our next destination of the day. Case-Pilote is a delightful little town with a really historic town hall, market and a church. There's also a beach here because we're right alongside the coastline. The Church of St. Joseph and of the Assumption is one of the oldest on the island. It's actually the second such church on site because the original one was destroyed in 1762 by the English. If you go inside, which is unfortunately closed right now, then you'll find lots of maritime elements, and that's because the original colonial architecture was usually done by people who came from the Marines. This is Le Carbet, and it can be found between Fort-de-France and Saint-Pierre on the northwest side of the island. This is actually a really important historical site in the history of Martinique because this is where Christopher Columbus arrived in 1502 during his fourth voyage to the Americas. It's also from here in 1635 where Martinique began to be colonized by the Europeans. The name Le Carbet actually derives from the Carib word meaning meeting place or the building where people would meet. The Caribs were the indigenous people who lived here prior to the arrival of the Europeans in the 16th century. Much like all of the other towns and villages in this part of the island, it's volcanic black sand here, and just behind me is the Mont Pelé, but unfortunately we can't see it at all. It's completely covered in cloud. Normally you can see a little bit and it's just the top that's covered, but today the rain has been so intense that the entirety of it completely covered. La Plage du Coin is one of the nicest beaches here in Le Carbet. There's a beach hut here where you can get drinks and food, and it's a great place to watch the sunset thanks to its position facing the west. If you look hard enough, you'll also find lots of pelicans fishing around sunset for their dinner. After you've finished admiring the sunset, then a great way to end your day at Le Carbet is to have cocktails on the beach at Le Petit Bonhomme. Unfortunately, a lot of people choose to miss out on the north of the island because it's much rainier here and the weather definitely isn't as good as in the south. However, if you do come here, you'll be delighted by the range of activities, amazing waterfalls, really dense, lush forest, and of course for your tourists. Sainte Anne is one of the smallest towns on the island. It's also one of the rainiest, meaning that this is probably one of the best places on the island to enjoy the beautiful fauna and flora around. The Saut Gendarme is a waterfall that's only around 10 meters in height, but the great thing about this one is that you'll only have to go down 30 steep steps to reach the falls, and so it's really accessible from the road. The perks of coming here on a rainy day are that we're the only people here. The rainfall means that the waterfall is really intense at the moment. Come and look. One of the best aspects of visiting Les Pitons du Carbet, which is the area we're in now, which is completely peppered with historic volcanoes, is the fact that there are so many waterfalls around. And when you're driving on the road, you'll see many, such as this one. These are mini falls. This is the Alma River. And if you walk further up the trail, you'll find a bigger falls, but we unfortunately don't have time for that. The little ones are very nice still. We're now on our way to what is probably the most hidden gem waterfall of the island. Antoine didn't even believe it exists, because on the tourist map it wasn't even listed, but luckily I saw some people standing nearby and I realized that there are steps that lead down to it. The Cascade Absalon is absolutely breathtaking, but if you do want to come down here, be sure to wear comfortable hiking shoes because the steps are very steep and slippery. Let's go and see it now. The Jardin de Balata is one of the most beautiful tropical gardens here in Martinique. It's around 10 kilometers or a 20-minute drive from Île de France, and it was created by a botanist in 1982 and then opened to the public in 1986. It's one of the pricier things we've done here as it costs €16 per person, but if you come just after a rainy weekend such as we've done, then you'll find beautiful blue skies, amazing flora, and even some hummingbirds. The garden isn't huge, and so you'll only need 1 to 1.5 hours to explore, but I do recommend wearing comfortable shoes because some of the paths are steep and rocky in places. Overall, there are over 3,000 tropical plant species from all over the world, including 300 palm varieties. The one thing you should note before you come though is that it will probably rain. Because of the garden's location in the mountains, it's very, very cloudy here, and so even if it seems like it will be sunny, it might rain during your visit, so do be prepared for that. Included in the price of the ticket, you can go on this tree walk. Unfortunately, as you can only go one person at a time, and understandably most people visiting the park want to go, the queue was 45 minutes to an hour long, and so we didn't have time to do it. The North-Atlantic and the Presqu'Île de la Campbell. The North Atlantic is probably the least touristy area of the island and has an authentic off-the-beaten-path feel as a result. This is also one of the most agricultural areas of Martinique and it's not unusual to see huge banana fields. Windswept and rugged, this area boasts little fishing villages and even a distillery in the heart of the jungle. Basse-Pointe is located right in the north of the island and the waves here are super fierce. We actually came because it was listed in our guidebook and there was a beautiful photo. Unfortunately, I think that was taken a few years ago because now the area is a bit run down. There are signs everywhere saying that it's going to be renovated soon, but I have no idea when that will happen. There's a lot of trash around the place, but there are also lots of crabs. This is a J.M. rum distillery, and the really cool thing about this particular distillery is that it's right in the heart of the jungle, and so when you're driving here you're surrounded by forest. Upon arrival, we unfortunately discovered that the visits are actually closed until later this year, 2025, for reparations, but the shop is still open. It's really, really unfortunate because when we looked on the website it said it was open still, but hopefully we'll see some fun things nonetheless. In order to decide which rum you want to try, you can smell them all like this. I'm not a big fan of rum. The weather wasn't ideal and so we stopped at a little cafe with a cover in Grande Rivière. There we tried a number of local specialties including plantain, lentils and Antoine had a local fish. There isn't much remaining of the old distillery at Macuba, but since it's just on the side of the road, you can easily stop your car, have a quick look around before departing again. Agriculture is one of the biggest industries here in Martinique today, and one of the biggest produced items is bananas. If you want to learn even more about the history of banana production and even taste some local varieties for yourself, then you can head to the Banana Museum, which is on the East Coast. Unfortunately, inside you can't take any photos or videos, so I can't show you the displays. But I would note that they're a bit old because a lot of the dates were from 2009 and some of the language used on them was a bit outdated. The translations also. But we did learn a lot of interesting facts about bananas, including that it's not a tree, it's actually the biggest herb in the world. Something else that we learned that's really interesting is that bananas actually originated in Southeast Asia and took around 1,000 years to traverse across the globe. Today, they're the most popular and widely eaten fruit in the world. The second part of the museum is the chance to walk through a banana plantation that's been planted with a number of different species of banana from all over the world. The other great thing about wandering through here is that you'll see other tropical flowers as well as some local birds. We even saw a few hummingbirds. At the end of the visit, there's a small shop selling all kinds of banana products. You can sample them inside. There is ketchup, mustard, and even a banana liqueur. We personally bought the banana ketchup. It was super tasty. There's also a restaurant on site, but it doesn't open for another hour or two still, so we don't have time to visit. So let's go on to our next stop. Presqu'Île de la Carnival is a beautiful peninsula around halfway down the island of Martinique. It's the most easterly side of the isle, and the real draw here is the beautiful wildlife, amazing sandy beaches and stunning vistas. So let's go and see what this area has to offer. If you want to do something historical in the area, then you can visit Chateau du Bouc, which is an 18th century sugarcane and coffee plantation. It does cost €8 per person, and there are a lot of other things to do on the isle. Well, sorry, the peninsula, as well as a 3-hour hike, which we're definitely going to prioritize. But yeah, if you do want to do something historic, that's the place to go. The hike around the whole peninsula takes around 3.5 hours, and I definitely would recommend wearing suitable footwear. Hopefully I'll be okay in my sandals. One of the best things about this hike is that you'll go through all kinds of different terrains. So as well as seeing the lush forest and of course the beaches, you'll be able to go through a mangrove where there are more crabs than I've ever seen in my life. The only thing that's the bad thing here is that there are a lot of mosquitoes. There are two hiking trails on the peninsula, a blue one and a yellow one. The yellow one is only around an hour to an hour and a half, whereas the blue one can be 3 to 4 hours depending on the route that you take. We're going to attempt to do the blue one because that way we get to see the mangrove, the beaches, the lighthouse, basically everything that the end of the peninsula has to offer. When you're hiking, there's one tree that you should be really aware of, and that's the Manzanilla tree. These are really, really toxic. Luckily, they're always marked with a red band, so don't touch any part of the tree. Even though the fruits look like apples, they are really, really toxic and they can be fatal. Even touching the bark with a wet hand, such as if you're sweaty, can cause severe burns and allergic reactions. The number one thing not to do is stand under these trees during the rain, because even though they provide shelter, when the sap drips off and touches your skin, 3rd-degree burns. So whatever you do, don't touch these. Watch out for pets and kids near them too. If you do this hike after the rain, then be aware that it's very muddy, and I should use one of those narrator voices to be like, it was indeed not okay to walk this hike in sandals. This area of the island is way wilder than I had initially anticipated. If you come here, bring lots of water because there are no snack stands. The beach isn't that great to swim in, and altogether, it's a really nice walk away from everyone else. It's really cool because in the part of the path which is closest to the weather station, there are loads of rocks with fossils in them. Just note that you're not allowed to take any fossils from the area. It's against the law in France. We finally made it to the top, and it was definitely worth the hike up. The view is amazing. There's actually a viewpoint table where you can see all of the nearby locations, and you can just enjoy amazing views over all of Martinique. The Centre-Atlantique part. The Centre-Atlantique is so called because it lies halfway down the island facing the Atlantic Sea, and it's one of my personal favourite areas of Martinique thanks to an abundance of verdant landscapes, sparkling coastline, and of course many exceptional viewpoints. This area also boasts a surprising number of tourist activities, from visiting rum distilleries to exploring beautiful gardens and even visiting an island where iguanas live. We've just arrived at the Jardin de Balata. It's in a really beautiful spot in the centre of Martinique, and we're getting a guided tour from the owner. Donc, vous avez ce jardin depuis combien de temps?
Alors, le jardin, on l'a conçu depuis une vingtaine d'années. Alors, au début, c'était plus pour la vente de fleurs, et après, on a rajouté la visite, ça fait 15 ans.
Et ça se visite tous les jours?
Oui, sauf le mercredi.
Et la meilleure période de l'année pour visiter, c'est?
Ah, ce moment. Ouais, à partir de maintenant, ça commence à bien fleuri, c'est mieux. Ouais.
Vous avez combien de variétés des fleurs et des plantes ici?
On a une centaine de variétés.
On peut aussi voir la nature comme les oiseaux.
Oui. Oui. Alors nous, on observe beaucoup, on tient compte de la nature parce qu'on a une période où on va tailler nos plantes, mais il y a une période où on ne peut pas tailler parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'oiseaux ici et ils font leur nid.
Ah oui.
Il ne faut pas les déranger.
D'accord, parfait. On va faire la visite alors, merci beaucoup.
Ok. Et là, on a des orchidées. L'orchidée araignée.
Celui-là, est-ce que ça vient de la Martinique ou...
Ouais, ça fait longtemps qu'on a sur l'île.
Et est-ce que vous avez beaucoup de la pluie dans cette région?
Oui.
Et ça peut mettre aux fleurs de pousser?
Ouais. Et ici, c'est beaucoup plus frais, plus alimenté en pluie que plus bas, de l'autre côté. Là, on est plus protégé et c'est pour ça qu'on a ces fleurs.
Et vous avez dit tout à l'heure aussi que votre position, ça vous permet d'avoir un super joli jardin parce que c'est un peu protégé, mais...
Par le vent, ouais. On est au pied de la montagne et le vent il passe derrière et il nous protège. Ouais. On est plus, c'est plus calme.
Et vous avez combien de visites par jour, normalement?
En ce moment, on a à peu près une cinquantaine par jour. Là, parce qu'on est entré dans la saison, la haute saison.
Et la haute saison ici, c'est de...
Ça commence décembre et ça va jusqu'en mai et avril. Ouais.
Celui-là, c'est quoi?
Alors, les grands qu'on a là, on est sur toute cette partie-là. On les appelle les Heliconia pendula. Et plus précisément, on les appelle les sexy pink. Les roses. Alors c'est très très demandé pour les fêtes.
Tout ça, ça vient de votre jardin?
D'ici, celui-là. Et on l'a fait sécher. Une fois séché, on le prend là. Voilà. Et là. On va casser. Donc on enlève la peau. Et puis on la torréfie.
Et puis c'est prêt à boire.
Et après on la fait moudre et puis on boit le petit café à l'ancienne.
Wow.
Et là c'est du curcuma.
Oui, ça s'appelle turmeric en anglais.
Ouais, c'est très bon pour le corps.
C'est trop bon, tous les plats.
On le râpe et puis ça fait des... incroyable.
Ah oui, on a goûté le jus de ça
Ouais,
plusieurs fois.
c'est
Oui.
incroyable. La papaye. Là. Et là c'est le bois d'aile. C'est une épice qui remplace le laurier. Je vais montrer là. Ça sent très fort. On le met dans les différents plats. Les sauces, le poisson, la viande. Ça sent comme des clous de girofle.
Mmh. Et celui-là, j'ai vu dans le supermarché hier.
Oui, c'est un citron. C'est une lime.
merci beaucoup pour la visite, c'est trop informatif, trop bien. Et votre jardin, c'est magnifique.
Oui. Les visiteurs nous disent qu'on a un beau jardin.
This is Habitation Clément, and it's probably the most famous rum distillery here on Martinique. It's in the top 5 attractions that everyone on the island wants to visit, and you can tell it's really touristy because when we got here we paid for our ticket and then they said don't eat any of the fruits on the trees, which seems obvious, but I guess if it's a touristy place then there are people that have done that. The story of the rummery actually dates all the way back to 1852 when Omer Clément was born. He was born 4 years after the abolition of slavery and was actually the grandson of freed slaves. Later on, he bought this domain which had once been used to grow sugar canes, and unfortunately this place was where slaves were used. And then when he bought the place after the abolition of slavery, he created his own rum distillery. He'd previously been a doctor and used funds from that in order to create what you now see today. It costs €13 per adult for a self-guided visit. I think you can pick up an audio guide, which we didn't because we don't have a great deal of time. When you're wandering around the grounds, there's lots of different sculptures, but unfortunately, I'm not really sure about the provenance of them or more information because the signs just have the name and the artist. If you've never been to a distillery before and you don't know how rum is made, then this is a great place to start because there's lots of really clear explanation panels in both French and English. You can even watch a film about how the distillery process works. The only thing I would say is that it's a bit of a critique, is that it does feel a bit clinical. Everything is really beautifully maintained, including the buildings, the explanations, but there's no one really here to help guide you. And you can definitely tell that this is more of a big production. We've been to distilleries all over the world now, and there's something really special about going and meeting the people who are actually making the products. Although I do think this is a fun experience nonetheless. During the visit, you also get to learn a bit about Creole architecture. For example, this house has stood on the domain for around 250 years. When you're in the main house, there's this Hall of Fame, or should I say Halls of Fame, because of the amount of people that have come here, and you can see their photos plastered all over the walls. We've spotted Jacques Chirac. Is it George Bush that we saw there? There are so many celebrities. I have never seen so many in one place. I explained that I'm not really into very strong liquors, and so the woman recommended that I try this one, which is a bit spiced. I'll try it now. It smells quite strong. It's a bit strong for me, but I can see why people would really love it. They also have liqueurs and cream-based products, and I'm going to try the almond one.
With the cream, but with the almond. And we have also another one.
That's really good. Today we're going to be visiting the eastern side of the island on a catamaran. We're here and the weather is amazing. We're going to be visiting really crystal clear waters and even an island where iguanas live. This is Josephine's pool, and it's alleged that the Empress Josephine used to bathe here. Whatever the case, whether that's true or not, it's amazing because it's a sandbar in the middle of the sea. We're having cocktails, it's really clear, the sand here is really nice and fine. I can't believe we're in the middle of the sea. We've just arrived at Îlet Chancel, and this island you can only reach by boat. It's the biggest of the 30 or so islands which encircle Martinique, and this one in particular is really famous for its iguanas. There's one native species as well as an invasive one. Hopefully we'll see some iguanas today. Îlet Chancel is also where you'll find the ruins of a sugar dwelling, pottery and boiler house, all of which were destroyed by a cyclone. If you visit with a guide, then they're sure to give you a more detailed explanation as to the history of the island. Just as I was giving up on the idea of actually being able to spot iguanas, our guide pointed some out to us. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to see any baby iguanas during our visit. However, we did learn something really interesting, and that's that the female iguanas are bright green, whereas the male ones are a dark brown colour. Almost every full day boat day on the island actually includes a meal, and this comprises of meats, fish, local vegetables and rice. The peninsula of Sainte Anne. Today we're going to be exploring the peninsula of Sainte Anne, which lies to the southeast of the island and is really famous for all of its beautiful white sand beaches. We're currently starting the day in the town of Sainte Anne, which is famous for having the most amount of beaches of any town in Martinique. It's very colourful, it's a fishing village. There's a church which resembles that of Anse Couleuvre, and so let's go and check that out before we go to the rest of the peninsula. Despite being in a pretty touristy area, Sainte Anne itself is quite eco-friendly, and that's because there was a mayor here who was really green for a long time. Now all of the hotels are quite discreet, and there's still quite an authentic ambience despite the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of people visiting. Even if you're not very interested in visiting churches, I definitely invite you to go inside. It's really unique in that the roof looks like the hull of a ship, I guess because we're right next to the sea and all of the architects would have come from the Marines. And the other interesting thing is that inside there's lots of chandeliers, which I don't think we've ever seen in a church before. If you're feeling particularly adventurous and you love a good view, then you can head up to the Calvary, which sits directly behind the Church of Notre Dame. It's a bit of a steep hike up, but you'll be rewarded from the top with amazing views. There's one beach that's really famous on the Sainte Anne Peninsula, and that's Les Salines. But if you want to head a bit off the beaten track, then you can head around a 15-minute drive south of Sainte Anne before you get to the Plage des Salines, which is on the southern tip of the island. And then you'll find Plage de Meunier, which means Miller's Beach. Here it's a lot more wild and rugged. The track to get here, it took us 10 minutes to drive 1 kilometre because it's so rough and filled with potholes. But once you get here, it's a bit of a hidden gem because there's hardly anyone else here. The Plage des Salines is the most popular destination on the peninsula of Sainte Anne. It's also widely regarded to be the most beautiful beach on the entirety of the island, thanks to its crystal clear blue waters, fine white sand, and just amazing views onto the rest of the island. It's honestly so beautiful here. You can lie out on the sand, go paddling in the water, and there are also a number of restaurants and bars here. It's really developed compared to a lot of the other beaches, but do be warned that this development has led to higher prices at the restaurants here than elsewhere on the island. While Les Salines might be one of the most popular places to visit on the island, if you go just around the corner and you can keep your car parked in the same place, then you'll find the Étang des Salines. This is a hidden gem of Martinique that most tourists don't know about, and so if you come here, you'll probably have the place to yourself. Here you can observe lots of local wildlife species, as this is the biggest freshwater lake closest to the sea anywhere in Martinique. We saw lots of different varieties of birds, but because it was so hot as it was the middle of the day, we couldn't stay for too long. The South Caribbean, which includes Les Trois-Îlets. The South Caribbean is probably the most touristy area of the island and is home to a large concentration of resorts and hotels. This is also where you'll find Le Diamant, a uniquely shaped rock just off the southern coastline. The Savane des Esclaves is an open-air museum and garden where you can learn about the history of slavery and the colonization of Martinique. It's a really moving experience which details a painful chapter of Martinique's past, but also the resilience of the people who were forced to live as slaves. Le Bourg D'Anse is one of the most iconic villages here in Martinique because of its beautiful church, which can be found at the end of a pontoon. The rest of the village is very colourful and there's a lovely white sand beach here. Thanks to just how picturesque this little corner of the island is, we actually ended up visiting several times during our stay in Martinique. Although quite small, the market at Anse is completely covered, open every day of the week, and you can find a variety of different souvenirs here, as well as fresh fruit and vegetables. As I mentioned, the church at Anse is one of the most iconic buildings on Martinique, and if you want to, then you can even wander inside for free. Dating back to the 17th century, it has had to be repaired numerous times over the centuries as a result of cyclones. If you're looking for a particularly magical sunset spot in Martinique, then I really recommend heading here as the sun sets, because you can sit out on the beach, enjoy your own apéro if you bring picnic supplies along, and just enjoy the sunset over the ocean. We didn't have a huge amount of time to explore Le Marin during our time in Martinique, but we did particularly enjoy dining at this restaurant, which even served vegetarian options. One of my favourite beaches on the entirety of the island has to be Anse Dufour. I really recommend coming prepared with a snorkeling mask, as if you go swimming here, then there's a very high chance that you'll be able to swim with turtles. I saw at least 3 during our time on the beach here. Le Diamant is not just the name of one of the most famous islands of Martinique, but it's also the name of a nearby town, which is really popular among tourists for its beautiful views. I would, however, say that the waves are huge here and it's often very windy, which makes it not a very good place to swim or sunbathe. It is, however, very beautiful. If you're looking for something historical to do in town, then you can even head inside the 19th century church, which, typical of the island, has a wooden roof. La Maison du Bagnard was built in the 1960s at the foot of Morne-Rouge, and it's really hard to imagine, but people actually lived back here several decades ago. Now it's currently under renovation, so you can't see inside, but I'm sure it'll be lovely when it's finished. This area also provides amazing views onto the Rocher du Diamant, which means diamond rock. And it's so cool because at certain times of the day, the light reflects off the cliff face to make beautiful patterns. This rock is also really famous in history because from 1804 to 1805, over a period of 17 months, the British actually commandeered the rock and they named it HMS Diamond Rock. At that time, 100 to 200 men actually lived on the rock, and it was a way of them blockading the area so that the French couldn't reach St. Lucia, which is just over there, and on a clear day you can actually see it from Martinique. Fort-de-France in the centre-western area of the island. Fort-de-France is the capital of Martinique and is home to around 75,000 inhabitants. The city is not really the main draw for visitors to the island, but it is here that you can discover gems like an exact replica of the Sacré-Coeur in Paris. Fort-de-France is the capital of Martinique and it's often nicknamed Paris in the Caribbean. The original name for the area was actually Fort Royal, though this was changed to Fort La République during the French Revolution. It was eventually renamed Fort-de-France at some point during the 19th century. Today, there are a few historical things to do here. The reason there aren't very many historic monuments in Fort-de-France is because there was a devastating fire here in 1890 which destroyed 3/4 of the town. However, one building which did survive, which is older, is the Scholker Library, and that's because it was actually constructed in 1889 in Paris, and it was shown at the Universal Exhibition of Paris at this time. Afterwards, it was completely dismantled before being reconstructed here in Martinique. It was opened to the public in 1893. Today, the building still functions as a public library. It's completely free to go inside, although you're not allowed to take photos of the current exhibitions. You can still take all the photos you want inside. The original library was actually made using 10,000 books that survived the fire of 1890, and today it still serves the people here of Fort-de-France. As Fort-de-France is the largest town on the island, it's also got the greatest variety of food choices. I really enjoyed the healthy bowls at So Elsie, and you could even compose your own, and it's all local ingredients. The most impressive church on the island has to be the enormous cathedral dedicated to St. Louis. It's constructed from metal to withstand hurricanes and is a true joy to wander through. It's also completely free to visit. Did you know that there's an exact scale replica model of the Sacré-Coeur of Paris here in the Caribbean? This is the Sacré-Coeur de Balata, and it's a 1:5 exact replica of that which can be found in Montmartre in Paris. After the devastating volcano eruption of 1902, many families from the surrounding region of Montpellier were displaced, and some of them sought refuge in Fort-de-France. In 1915, it was decided that there should probably be a new place of worship for these people, and so the first stone was laid here in the top of Fort-de-France in 1924. Sacré-Coeur de Balata was completed 1 year later. Today you can visit for free. It's definitely not in as good of a condition as that which is in Paris, but it's very cool. They've definitely adapted it to the jungle. A lot of it is made of reinforced concrete, which is a commonly used material here. We actually ended up staying in a number of places across the island, but I'll just highlight some of my favourites, as a few others had some pretty catastrophic issues, and I won't say they had a million cockroaches, but it was close. Anyway, when selecting a hotel, I really recommend choosing somewhere with cooking facilities, as restaurants on the island can be pretty expensive and the sun sets really early, so you won't want to go out too late anyway. The first hotel that we really enjoyed staying at was actually more of a resort, and that was Pierre et Vacances. That's in the south of the island. The second hotel I want to highlight was actually based in the north of the island. It's called Madi Creole, and we even had our own sea view from our room. It was just magical to wake up every day, walk out onto our balcony and enjoy views of the sea and the beaches, and even on some days, Montpellier. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more France travel content. See you next time. Bye!